Our climate is changing. The temperature of the earth is increasing because people's actions are disturbing the natural balance of gases in the atmosphere. Scientists say that if global temperatures rise, the water supply of 1 billion people could be threatened. Climate change is a significant change in average weather conditions. Everest Mugambwa from Climate Action Network Uganda explains the various phases of climate change.
Yeah, when you talk about climate change in Uganda here, people understand it best by looking at what happens, for example, when the weather changes come. First and foremost, it's no longer like it was before when we had the traditional seasons, where farmers, for example, knew that in such and such a month they were supposed to plant, and then in a certain period of time in the year they're supposed to be harvesting. It's no longer the business. Our scientists are finding it difficult to predict the weather to the extent that nowadays they can even announce on the radio that it will rain and then it shines. They say it will shine and then it rains, so that personal preparedness is lacking. Number two, when it rains, then it comes in unexpected amounts. You find, for example, that in Kampala, if it rained for, say, an hour, almost half of the whole city will flood. Those are signs of climate change, which never used to be the case. In some places, there is a lot of drought. I remember sometime back in 2008, around 2008, 2007, when we had the so-called Teso floods. It was flooding then in Teso so much that Teso floods became so topical in Uganda. Then later on, the following years, 2009, it was drought almost the whole year. So we face both those extremes of climate change. Climate change also comes in a number of different phases. It affects us differently. For example, for the ladies, we know very well that in most cases these keep at home as the gentlemen keep in the public domain. So those in the public domain are affected differently from those who are at home. For example, the ladies at home are supposed to provide the food. Many of them do the actual digging, the planting, the agriculture and what have you. So they face a challenge of planting using the planting materials which they buy, and then later on getting nothing out of it. Yet at the onset they thought maybe these beans will take 2 months. As they plant 1 week down the road, it stops raining. Then later on it shines for, say, another 1 month. Then that means from that early stage of germination, the seeds have been spoiled. So, and in the long run, it will lead to high food prices to those who have managed to have something at the end of the day, and then insecurity in terms of food. Yeah, there are a number of measures that we can take. We've been advocating for fast-growing foods, such that if we predicted a short period of rain, grow something that can grow fast, that can use the limited water in the soils. That is one. We also advocate for agroforestry. This is the mixture of crops and trees. We have also advocated for fast-growing trees to begin with, because many of our farmers do not have that patience of waiting for one tree to take 20 years to grow. And also, since our farmers say they do not have enough land where to put the crops and then the trees, we advocate for fruit trees. We also advocate for proper drainage. For example, in the cities, proper drainage channels should be put in place. It should be coupled with good measures of waste management, because we found it that even where the drainage is proper, the poor methods of waste management have clogged the channels, and then at the same time, the same has led to floods whenever it rains a little. We also advocate for rainwater harvesting. You find that in the rain seasons, it is common to let the water go as it wishes. Then during the dry seasons, we look for water and we can't find it. A number of surveys have been carried out, and we found that as the people's plans of building are approved, nothing like rainwater harvesting has been incorporated in that so far. And what happens is that when it rains, because many of our houses have no gutter, the whole city becomes one single gutter, and the whole city floods. You can just imagine if we had those gutters to each and every house we have in Kampala, for example, how much water would correct, and how much water and how much we would have saved in terms of floods.
One of the impacts of climate change is landslides, which involves a wide range of ground movement and landslides. Moses Mukobe, who experienced floods and landslides in Bududa in eastern Uganda, explains how Hands of Action, a community-based organization, is helping people adapt to climate change. One of them is the A-frame method of farming. He tells us how the farming patterns have changed due to climate change.
The A-frame is in V, or the simplest word now to demonstrate is in F-form. So this one you put a stone in the between, and then you start rotating to the hills. You take the hills, and then you find the point where you are going to start, how the water flow into that frame. So that is how we normally train them, that is how we train them how to make the terracing and the trenches in the hills. So that way, after that, we give them the tree. The grass called the vetiver grass. You plant along it it holds the soil not to move. In Buddha, I think you have ever had, it was a basket of food. We used to grow beans, coffee, bananas, sweet potatoes, millet, all sorts of food, variety of food. Before it was doing very well, but now it doesn't do well, as the rain used to start in late December up to Feb. That is when we used to plant. But now things have changed completely, because now people start growing food in April and late March. So this, in the process, people things have turned out, when, for example, when like coffee going to flowering, there is some diseases which come to destroy them, and beans also turns yellow. Millet also, it dries up because some in the process, rain doesn't come in time as they used to do. So in the process, this is really affecting now than before.
He says there should be sustainable environment management practices. Landslides are aggravated by human activities. Human causes include deforestation, cultivation and construction, which destabilize the already fragile slopes, vibrations from machinery or traffic, blasting of earth rock, earthwork which affects and alters the shape of the slope, or which imposes new loads on an existing slope. In shallow soils, the removal of deep-rooted vegetation that binds the bedrock. Construction, agricultural or forestry activities like logging, which change the amount of water which inflates the soil. Warmer temperatures are already changing rainfall patterns, resulting in floods and droughts, which are becoming worse. Droughts are leading to water shortages. Landslides and floods are killing people, causing erosion and waterborne diseases. Aggravated with the increasing population and deforestation, livelihoods of farmers have been greatly affected. David Mwayafu explains the global and national programs on climate change and the coping mechanisms that communities can adapt.
Climate change is something that is very interesting in terms of science. The scientists at first, they believe that climate change is something that it has to be observed after 35 years. It is the observable weather elements for a period of 30 and above years for one to ascertain the climate change. So when it comes to the current discussion, the idea has been taken up under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and it has, after it approved the International Panel on Climate Change to carry out the assessment to prove that whether there was climate change. First, scientists never believed that there was a climate change. So long as the Earth continues to revolve around the Earth, the same 365.25 days a year, without any change of space, there will be no change. But then what they discovered that in the weather elements that are very important for our case, precipitation, which is about rainfall, and temperature, which is about during sunshine. So it was observed that the global temperatures have increased, and because of the increase in global temperatures, it has resulted into global climate change, and that is why we are experiencing erratic rainfall, we are experiencing prolonged drought, and farmers cannot even tell when it is the time for them to plant their crops. The seasons have not changed, but what has changed is the increase in the temperature, which causes the challenges of drought and floods. And that is why we have to have a coping mechanism on how to handle, plan for growing crops, when to grow, how long will it take for you to harvest, such ideas. Where should you do it, which activities, drought-resistant crops, and so many other things that come with it. So that is why the idea of climate change has gained momentum in the science.
For the last 50 years, global warming has been increasing, and the 17 warmest years since records began have been in the last 20 years. Global warming is causing average temperatures to increase. It will affect everyone and will have serious impacts on our health, our environment, and our food and water supplies.